Hi guys, how are you doing today? Hope you are having a sunny day. Ready for some news stories? Let's go to the first one, about OP's dad, who cheated on OP's mom and left her for his affair partner, and how OP took revenge on him and his new family years later. Listen to the story, guys, to find out what OP did, and of course to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, don't forget to leave a comment. My dad basically vanished from my life when I was 9. He had just gotten a massive promotion and was going to be bringing in a 6-figure salary, but oh, look at that. He met someone younger and prettier than my mother and bounced. He used his newfound wealth to make sure that he never paid alimony or child support, leaving us destitute while taking his new hotter woman and their daughters to the Caribbean and Europe. Well, recently he got cancer, and while on his deathbed, decided what he really needed to do was find me and give me a non-apology that basically came to, well, you got rich anyway, so what's the harm? Ignoring the fact that mom worked herself to death and my grandparents had to come out of retirement to keep us off the streets, considering he managed to saddle my mom with all the debt that went into building his fortune. I called him every name under the book, told him he deserved the painful death he was going to have, and left. After complaining about this to my father-in-law, he informed me that I definitely had a case to sue dear old dad's estate after he died on behalf of my mom for all the money he didn't pay in child support and alimony. And one of father-in-law's buddies from law school has a raging justice boner for those kinds of cases. Well, one meeting with this guy, I had a lot of emails back and forth from my dad and mom, her begging him for money and him mocking her. We file suit once daddy kicks the bucket. And holy legal curb-stomping Batman, the judge gives us everything and more. The entire settlement was larger than the total value of Pop's estate. Just on Friday, I got the last piece of his assets. It takes forever to do a full asset investigation. His house. The big, beautiful beachfront house he bought for his second wife after she got pregnant with their first kid. She insisted on turning over the keys herself for some reason at the house. So I stood there with a pair of cops, my wife insisted, and watched this homewrecker and her 3 kids hand over. I then got to listen to her lecture me about how terrible I am, not arguing that point, for stealing her children's inheritance and stealing from a hard-working dead man. I stood there with a crap-eating grin and just told her, "Lady, I'm just a bad man getting revenge on a worse man." Took the keys and told them to get off my property. The one downside to all of this is my grandfather has been extremely unhappy with my crusade, saying that because of what happened, I met and married the love of my life. I went to a great college for free, and he found a new career path he loves. How everyone forgot my mom couldn't take time off to see a doctor and died because she had to work every day is beyond me. I don't care. I hated what my dad did to us. He and that gold digger he married deserve at least a modicum of the fear and pain I lived with as a kid. Edit to add. All kids involved are early to mid-20s with a college education, so no destitute children were created in the telling of this story. Edit 2. Also, She-Troll's offspring all have not unsubstantial assets at their disposal. Daddy-O's estate would have just been one more 6-figure vacation for them. "Lady, I'm just a bad man getting revenge on a worse man," is actually one of the most badass lines I've ever heard. Looks like OP's father and the homewrecker got what they deserved. Considering the judge and law sided with OP, I personally really don't see how OP is a bad man. I personally would have done the same. Wouldn't have you guys? And now let's see if the community agrees with me. Venti McVenterton says, "Sounds like good old karma finally got around to wrapping up some loose ends. Not to laugh at a dying, now dead man, but it's funny how death makes people think they are absolved of a lifetime of being a crappy person. He must have made a real good life for himself after bailing on his previous family for him to be delusional enough to think, hey, I'm dying. Let me reach out to that son of mine I've shunned for nearly all his life. I'm sure he would love one last goodbye to the dad who abandoned him." How easily some people forget. Labman 007 says, "You know, I wouldn't approve of this, but when OP says dad made his riches work for him, so he didn't have to pay child support, I approve of this message. Karma can be a B, and I feel you, my friend, just won. The woman who was left out to dry didn't seem to care that you guys had nothing growing up, so now she can live like you had to growing up." Countryboy432 says, "Not the a-hole. He should have provided for his first family before lavishing his second family with the premium gifts. The second wife should have ensured he did that." My 27 female, Cousin, 26 female, and her fiancé, 26 male, are supposed to get married around spring. They've been engaged for 2 years. Cousin has been living with us since she was 3, after her parents passed away, and I love her dearly as my younger sister, and I support her in many of her decisions, except for this marriage. I feel like my cousin is rushing into things and ignoring the fact that they're not financially stable. Neither of them has a job, and while she is in a PhD program, they're living off some of her research funds. It is not enough to make a living. They are currently residing in an apartment that his parents are paying for. To be fair, I never approved of their relationship, even when they were dating, and I haven't softened up on him yet. I've been vocal with her about wanting them to break up their relationship, now engagement. I find him obnoxious and rude, and he has made some unnecessary comments that still boil me. For instance, whenever we invite them for dinner, he makes snarky remarks about my wife's traditional dishes. And no, we've never forced them to eat any of them. Those were more for my wife than for them. But he compliments everything I make, even sometimes as simple as coffee, and he keeps telling me that I'll make a good man happy one day. It's infuriating that my cousin just ignores this. His disrespect for my marriage is the reason for this whole situation. With the wedding on the way, he introduced me to the other funder, his relative. We hit it off right away. We're close in age and share similar interests, so we bonded well. But I started to notice that my brother-in-law was behaving odd. Like he would try to give us space to be alone with each other, or give us hints that we are a natural couple. I had to tell the other person that I have a wife, and what he told me in return really shocked me to the core. Brother-in-law's been going around telling his family that I'm getting a divorce because my wife cheated. The sheer audacity of this man baffled me. I left and, without saying a word to anyone, withdrew my fund. After cooling down, I informed the couple, my wife, and my parents of what I had done and why. My cousin called me crying and begging for the funds, but I told her no. If she can't afford a wedding, then don't have one. My brother-in-law has resorted to calling me names and is getting his parents involved in it as well. My parents are okay with it, as it is my money, but my wife, although she is angry with what brother-in-law did, doesn't support my action. Whether I withdrew the fund or not, they will get married and stay family with us. So this would only cause a rift with my sister. While I understand her point, I don't see why I should support the marriage of someone who doesn't respect mine. So am I the a-hole for withdrawing funds because my future brother-in-law slandered my marriage? Well, in my opinion, OP definitely should not give money to someone who doesn't respect OP in her marriage. OP's sister is not innocent in this. She must have known what he was saying and doing. OP has set the boundaries with them now and should not back down. Hopefully she will see he is toxic. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Hippo Fippo says, "Not the a-hole. He sounds awful. I think you've every right to refuse any funds given how repeatedly disrespectful he has been. It could definitely cause a rift with your cousin. But I personally think rather than enabling the situation, rifts can be resolved over time if they occur. But enabling bad behavior is tough to crack, and your brother-in-law needs to face consequences for his actions." Bindi Toe Pilot says, "Not the a-hole. I don't get why your wife is disagreeing with you over this. He sounds awful and weird." Shishimi88 says, "Not the a-hole. Save the money for you and your wife. Why would you give it to a person that's trying to ruin your marriage?" My 18 female, cousin, 8 male, has been under my family's care since his mother passed away from cancer about a year ago. She was a single parent and didn't leave a will or anything, but asked my parents to take care of her son, and after she passed, the $20,000 she had in her bank were given to my parents. My aunt never actually told us what to do with that money, but my mother, her sister, decided it was best that we use that money to pay for part of his college funds and have him get a part-time job to pay for the rest when he was older. My mom then made a joint account with him and kept the money there to gather interest, but decided not to tell him as she didn't want a child to know he had $20K under his name. A few days ago, I got in an argument with him since he was misbehaving, as he wanted to go on my MacBook to play video games. I usually just let him go on my Mac in my room unsupervised when I'm not using it, and when I warned him not to disturb me since I was busy with my project or he won't get to play when I leave for work, he started tossing my stuff in the bin. So I shut my MacBook down and left the house. When I came back, however, my mom told me the MacBook was wrecked since he threw it on the floor while she was cooking dinner. My room is on the second floor, so she wasn't able to watch him. Since my AppleCare had already expired, It meant that it'll cost a lot to replace it. My data was stored in my cloud, but I had a project I needed to submit by the end of the week, so the quickest solution was to get a replacement. But we didn't exactly have $3,000 to spare, so we decided to just use the money in his joint account. When my mother told my grandma how we settled the issue, however, she instead accused my mother for stealing from my cousin and said we should have used our own money to pay for it, especially since he didn't even know he had that kind of money. Am I the a-hole? Edit. We live in Singapore, and the new one is SGD 3000, approximately USD 2100. It's sad that his mother died, but that doesn't give an excuse for what he did, and he's old enough to know what he was doing. I don't think OP's family was wrong. He made a decision to break it, and if OP's family didn't have the money from his mom, it would have been completely on OP's family to cover it, which is wrong, yes. It was his money essentially, but he also broke it, so to use that money to replace it makes complete sense to me. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Fool me once, shame on you says. Everyone sucks here. Let's be realistic about this, because most of the responses I'm seeing are incredibly over the top and hyperbolic. 1. An 8-year-old who is definitely old enough to know better threw an entire laptop on the floor, and what I can only imagine was a tantrum. He is old enough to be responsible for his behavior, which means replacing what he deliberately broke when he knew he wasn't supposed to be using it in the first place. But given his age, legally what that means is that his parents or guardians are responsible for replacing it. That's where this gets tricky, but not nearly as tricky as people are making it out to be. 2. Your grandmother is an a-hole for suggesting that your mother stole from him, as are half the commenters here. It doesn't matter whether he knew that that money existed or not, because money given to his guardians in casual trust for him, not a trust fund per se, is not technically his money, as others have pointed out. It is money that is intended to be used towards his care or needs as his guardian sees fit. That means that your mother made a sensible choice. Ideally, most of it will go to his future education, but also, if his own mother were still alive, she would have been responsible for the damage he had incurred, and this was her money. Therefore, it is appropriate that it be used to pay for the damage. It is money belonging to his guardian and meant to be used exactly for situations like this, where a parent would have used their money on him, or in this case, on a debt he incurred. But 3. You and your parents are also a-holes because, as others have noted, the computer was not a brand spanking new, just off the shelf, top of the line MacBook. Your family took advantage of your access to an 8-year-old's funds to overspend because you had no oversight or anyone to protest, which is unconscionable. Was it fair to buy a new MacBook? Absolutely. Was it reasonable to spend $3,000 on it? Absolutely not. You yourself say that it was 3 years old and you'd run out the warranty. The appropriate thing was to either pay for it to be fixed or to buy a more budget-friendly MacBook with the funds, either a lesser model or a refurbished one, commensurate to the actual value of what was broken. To add, this is my first time writing, so please be kind. I was told by a friend to write and see the people's reaction. I'm male 19 and have an older brother 23. Around 4 years ago, my father, 42, got married to my stepmother, 35, after leaving my mother, 41. My mother is French and my father is from America. After 5 months of leaving my mother, my father started to date my stepmother, and a couple months later, they got married. My stepmother has 2 children, a boy, Henry, 13, and a daughter, Hannah, 8. My relationship with my stepmother isn't great, but we agree on some things. The incident happened 5 weeks ago when I was celebrating my 19th birthday. As guests started to arrive and the party started, it was time to blow out the candles. Before I could have done that, my mother came in the country to surprise me. Along, she brought a gold bracelet with my name on it and my horoscope sign engraved onto it. My stepsister saw the bracelet and immediately wanted it, but my stepmother told her no. Noted, she has a habit of wanting and taking things that didn't belong to her, and her mother encouraged her behavior. I spoke to my father about it, and I even threatened him that I would move to France and live with my mother if it didn't stop. After blowing out the candles, she came up to me and asked for it. I told her no, but I was stupid and left it on the table with the other gifts. Later into the night, I heard my mother shouting. I went to see what was happening. It was my mother and my stepmother arguing, and behind my stepmother was my stepsister with the bracelet around her hand. A moment later, my father came and tried to calm both of them down. as both me and my mother pointed out that my stepsister took the bracelet, even after I told her no. My father told my stepsister to hand it over, but she threw a tantrum and tried running away, but I grabbed her hand and pulling the bracelet off. In the flash of a second, my stepmother pushed and slapped me for grabbing her daughter. I would admit that when I grabbed her, I did squeeze her tightly. In the heat of the moment, I slapped back my stepmother, and my father yelled at me for hitting my stepmother. Soon after, basically everyone had heard the commotion while my stepmother cried at the top of her lungs, and saying that I slapped her. My stepbrother started to argue, but soon calmed down after my brother and a couple cousins on my father's side spoke to him. I left the party with my mother and brother. I spent 2 days at my mother's hotel before she left. When I got back home, my stepmother and her children didn't say a word to me, only throwing hints at me. And father hardly spoke to me, due to me not apologizing. But a week after the incident, I started to get texts and calls from my stepmother's family, saying how I'm a horrible person for hitting my stepmother. It got annoying, and I complained to my father, but he hasn't told my stepmother anything to my knowledge, and they started sending photos of me that they edited and wrote "woman beater," which caused me to delete my social media accounts and create different ones. I know hitting women is wrong, and I don't encourage it, but in my point of view, she hit me first, and I got angry, but I'm considering apologizing to her and getting over the entire issue. But what should I do? And I'm looking forward to spending the holidays with my mother. So am I the a-hole here? Artistic Deal says, move to France. Natalie Potts says, nah man, you're not the a-hole. She slapped first, you just defended yourself. And her fam harassing you? What a bunch of jerks. Glad you got out of that toxic situation with your mom and brother for a bit though. Keep us updated on what goes down next. Cookies 2 says, honestly not the a-hole. You reacted in self-defense. The first and only time I slapped my mother was when she slapped me across the face. It was an instinctual reaction and response. She shouldn't have hit you. You didn't hurt her daughter by grabbing her. She threw a fit because she doesn't know the word no. Biggest point here, your dad didn't choose you. He chose his wife and her kids. Move to France if you have the opportunity.